Sleepyheads. I'm back with another ASMR story time in infamous Baltimore. This episode, I'm going to talk about Joseph Tiny Methany. So, trigger warning for anyone who may be actually listening, even passively listening. This is about a crime, very serious crime against women, and talks about violent acts, multiple violent acts. So if this is not your cup of tea, go watch some of my other videos, College Chronicles, some of the soundscapes I've created, but maybe this episode is not for you. Okay? Alright. Okay, so I think what I'm gonna do is just give you the meat and potatoes first, and then I will give you the sides of this case. It's kind of long, so just bear with me. Hopefully I can get through it in 30 minutes, but we'll see. I know I'm not the first person to talk about this person and his crimes. I know several ASMR artists have talked about this before, but I just figured I'd throw it in there because this is a hometown story. So, okay. So, I will start by telling you about Joseph himself. So, born March 2nd, 1955, Joseph Roy Methany was one of 6 kids who lived in Essex, Maryland. He was born to an alcoholic father and a very busy working mother. Methany was convicted of killing Kathy Ann Magaziner, who was age 45 at the time of her death, and Kimberly Spicer, who was age 26 at the time of her death, and burying them in a lot at a Southwest Baltimore pallet company where he worked. He admitted to murdering and robbing Miss Magaziner after he was arrested as a suspect in the unrelated murder of Miss Kimberly Spicer. During the time of the killings, Methany worked as a $7 an hour forklift driver at the pallet factory in Southwest Baltimore. Spicer's body was found on December 15, 1996, under a trailer at the factory. 3 days later, Methany led police to a shallow grave on the property that held Magaziner's remains. The source material for what I'm about to go through is July 7th, a Baltimore magazine. Excuse me. Oh my goodness, I'm trying to put you to sleep, and I feel like I'm putting myself to sleep. Apologies. So the source material that I'm referencing today is from a Baltimore Sun article from July 7th, 2017, written by Tim Prudente, and the actual court case, Joe Methany versus State of Maryland, number 149, September, term 1998, decided July 24th, 2000. And then July 25th, 2000, Washington Post article by Frederick Kunkel. So Methany was originally picked up by police because of the murder of Kimberly Spicer, who he met in a bar in Arbutus, a southwestern suburb of Baltimore. So if you're familiar with Baltimore and all, it's like the city and then there's the suburbs. So if you pull up Baltimore on a map, Arbutus will pop up. It's a little tiny, little something or other, just southwest of Arbutus. Southwest of Baltimore. Excuse me. Fun fact. The first governor that the person that was governor when I first moved to Baltimore back in 2008 was governor. He was governor, but he was from Arbutus actually. Okay, so anyway, also witness to the slaying of Kathy Ann Magaziner, whom he also buried in the pallet yard where he lived. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, he lived and worked on the premises. He lived on the premises of the pallet factory where he worked. And so that's where the women were found. Though I wasn't able to find any court transcripts from the cases. I think I earlier said that I actually was able to find the transcripts. I was not totally. I found records, and so what am I talking about? I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm all over the place. I actually did these notes I have are old. I wasn't able to find recordings, but I was able to find the actual transcripts of what was said, where Methany admitted the killings. So these weren't court okay. I'm going through my notes. See, I'm not even reading my notes appropriately. So these aren't court transcripts. This is a transcript of a recording of Methany, though. I think his statement, and that's what I'm going to read to you. So on December 15th, 1996, at approximately 1:40 a.m., members of the Baltimore City Police Department and the Federal Bureau of Investigation Task Force arrested defendant Joe R. Methany, this is the court transcript, in an unrelated manner in the 1700 block of Iverness Street in Baltimore City. You should pull up a map too. Like, if you're bored and not doing anything else, pull up a map. A Baltimore City police officer transported him to the homicide unit of the Baltimore City Police Department. During the course of the unrelated investigation, the defendant gave several statements to detectives of the Baltimore City Police Department Homicide Division. A review of those statements would indicate that the defendant met the victim, Catherine Magaziner, one night in July 1984, and he took her to his trailer located at Joe Stein and Son Pallet Company. While in his trailer, he had sex with Miss Magaziner while she was partially clothed. Miss Magaziner had been in his trailer approximately 1 hour when the defendant strangled her and robbed her of her purse and clothing. Then the defendant buried Catherine Magaziner in a shallow grave and buried her purse and clothing in a separate location. Joe Stein and Son Pallet Company is located at 3200 James Street, which is in the southwest corner of Baltimore City. The company is situated on a lot which is adjacent to a wooded area. The company has a locked entrance gate and is surrounded in part by an 8-foot-high chain-link fence with barbed wire on top. The lot is approximately the size of a square city block. There is a warehouse office building that is surrounded by literally thousands of wooden pallets, which are stacked at varying heights throughout the lot. There is no business conducted at the company or surrounding companies during the evening hours. James Street is a dead-end street where there is very little to no pedestrian traffic. The closest main thoroughfare is Washington Boulevard. The defendant lived in a small one-room trailer located on the south fence. The nearest residential development to the pallet company is approximately 2 blocks away. So let me just pause here before I go further. So, to recap, Methany lived on the premises of the pallet company where he worked. The pallet company itself is essentially located, or was at the time, located on a dead-end street in an area that's tucked away that is, for the most part, not super close to residential residences. best way I could describe it, because actually there are little nooks and crannies like this all over Baltimore City. The best way I could describe it, it's like a small industrial park. You ever been to an industrial park? For some reason, Baltimore kind of has a bunch of them, especially on the outskirts, because that's just kind of how Baltimore's grown out. But yeah, it's like, if you've ever been to an industrial park, even a small one, you know, like a little nook and cranny area where there's warehouses, little small brick warehouses. This is kind of on dead-end streets where, you know, nobody really pays attention to. They're all in the gut. This is exactly where that is. And I've actually, a couple of years ago, I had occasion to drive in and around this little area, and it's like, when they're saying it's like a dead end, it's quiet. It's dead end and it's quiet. It almost feels as if folks who needed space just kind of carved this little bit out, like folks who needed to create a space for their company just kind of carved this out of kind of nothingness, and then kind of set it back away from the houses. So yeah, this is a really accurate description of where this place is located. Like I said, there's several little places like this, or little nooks and crannies like this, all over the greater metropolitan Baltimore area. So let's talk for a second about why he did what he did. So per the court transcript, when questioned by police in the presence of his attorney on January 3rd, 1997, Methany said that he killed Miss Magaziner on July 3rd, 1994, and when asked why he killed her, Methany replied, "Sense of power. I don't know. Vulnerable. I dread it. Just, I got a rush out of it. Got a high out of it. Call it what you want. I had no real excuse why other than I like to do it. I don't know how to describe it." At his sentencing, he requested to be put to death and said the words, "I'm sorry," will never come out, for they would be a lie. I am more than willing to give up my life for what I have done, to have God judge me and send me to hell for eternity. Charged but not convicted of the axe murder of 2 homeless men in an encampment, he would later comment that he lied when he said he wasn't involved in the crime, and that he would go away with murder. He got away with murder. From the Washington Post article comes this excerpt. Though Methany told police that he had killed as many as 10 people, Sharon A.H. May, Deputy State's Attorney from Baltimore, said investigators developed evidence to obtain indictments in the deaths of only 3 women: Magaziner, again 45, Tony Lynn Ingrazia, 28, who I haven't mentioned until now, and Kimberly Lynn Spicer, 26. Methany, who was 45 at the time, is serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole for Spicer's death. At the news of his death, some UK news outlets ran stories about him being a cannibal, retelling Methany's tales of how he allegedly barbecued the flesh of some of the Magaziner and Spicer, and sold it on the side of the road. But as I mentioned, I only found the court transcript of the Magaziner case, so I can't speak to what medical examiners found out about either women's bodies. But nowhere in the court transcript do the medical examiners share how they found cut marks on Magaziner's remains. So, just backing up for a taste. So after he was tried and convicted of the killings of Miss Magaziner and Miss Spicer, he was also found guilty of the killing of Tony Lynn Ingrazia. And I think what I left out here is, if I'm remembering my research correctly, I think what they were saying was that all of these women, that what they had in common was that they were sex workers, and that Methany chose to abuse these women for a sense of power, as he kind of stated when the police asked why he did what he did. And so he's convicted and he goes to prison, and for years he builds this kind of cult around him, and then in prison comes the story of cannibalism. He begins to tell bunkmates and things like that. Not only did he get away with the gruesome murders of other people, including folks that were living in homeless encampments, but that he was actually a cannibal, and he actually took some of the skin, took some of the flesh of Methany and not Methany, but Magaziner and Spicer, desecrated their bodies and sold their food sold their flesh on the side of the road, like so many like hot dogs or what have you. But again, these are the things that came out when he was in prison, and there was no evidence brought up in the court transcripts, which I've just read, that said anything about the condition of the bodies of these women, or mentioned cannibalism at all. So it's safe to say that he made this up because, for whatever the same reason why anybody lies about anything, you know. So, so sentenced to die in 1998, a Maryland Court of Appeals overturned the sentence and commuted his sentence to life in prison. The Maryland High Court argued that prosecutors added the robbery charge against Methany as an excuse to seek the death penalty. Remember that they charged him with her death and also the theft of her purse and clothes. Talking about Magaziner, charged him with the theft of Magaziner's purse and clothes. And so his attorneys were saying that the state was using that the robbery charge as an excuse to seek the death penalty. Well, the High Court said this. The High Court said that the state was using this as an excuse to seek the death penalty, and one member went so far as to say, in my view, the real reason the death penalty was sought in this case is that Mr. Methany was a heinous serial murderer. And I think it's important to note here that Methany was also charged in the stabbing and strangulation death. So this is, I'm sorry, I'm going back to my notes. That he was charged with the stabbing and strangulation death of Tony Lynn Ingrazia, but charges were later dropped due to lack of evidence. So he was only convicted. So he was charged with the murders of those three women, including Tony Ingrazia, but he was only convicted of the deaths of Magaziner and Spicer. Joseph Methany died August 5th, 2017, alone in a cell in a Western Maryland Correctional Institute in Cumberland. So I know this is kind of all over the place, but yeah, I first heard about this case actually on YouTube. I was not around, obviously I wasn't here when the cases happened, when this was a big deal, but I don't remember hearing it anywhere else. The first time I remember when I moved here, and I heard a lot of true crime cases. Everybody's heard of I'm forgetting their name, but the high profile crime about the murder of Heyy and the serial podcast and all that stuff. That happened well after I moved here, or at least the serial came out well after I had moved to Baltimore. But and I had heard about a lot of high profile crimes, some of which I will share in future episodes. But this this crime, I actually did not hear from Baltimore. I heard, or even someone who was from Baltimore, because, Sarah Koenig was a Baltimore reporter, and this was something that came across to her desk, so that was a reason why she brought that up. But yeah, I had actually heard about this case from, I think it was a YouTuber. It wasn't an ASMR artist. It was a YouTuber that was just talking about true crime, and then I looked it up myself, and I was able to find the court transcript to add more color to the story, because typically what happens is people tell the story and they focus on the fact that they kind of perpetuate the allegation that he was a cannibal, and they always kind of end it with saying, well, maybe he wasn't, there's nothing to substantiate that claim, but folks don't often actually bring up the court transcripts to refute the claim, and I think we do a disservice, right? I think it was I think it was disrespectful, downright disrespectful to the memories of Magaziner and Spicer, and to the families, the living relatives of folks, of those two women who were still around, who were probably at his trial, or probably aware of what was happening with him. Like, that's a disservice to kind of glorify what he did. I believe him when he said and to police that it was a power thing. He was living in a trailer on a warehouse lot in a dead-end street in a very poor section, low-income section of Baltimore. He was not doing great. He was living where he worked, and not in a fun way. And so, of course, I'm sorry, I had to pause really quickly. Somebody knocked on my door. Anyway, yeah, of course, he would take opportunities to prey on women who were weaker than him, vulnerable than them. Because if you pull up a picture of Joe Methany, he was a big guy. So of course he used his size as an advantage. I'm sure he used his size as an advantage. And if you pull up those articles that I told you about, I'm sure you'll learn more about, these women that he victimized. But yeah. And so, what do I think about this? I think the same thing I always think about true crime, especially true crime at the hands of men. The way we socialize men is the way we socialize boys does it them a disservice, because they end up growing up to be men that, if you're not careful, you can, well, let me back up. Something we can't miss about Joseph Metheny when we're talking about his crimes as an adult was that, so he grew up in and around Baltimore, right? And actually, I think he grew up in Essex. I said that. He grew up in Essex, which is just outside of Baltimore. And his mother was not home a lot, which meant that his father was the primary parent at home. What we know is that he was abused severely as a child and well into his teens. Again, this is not an excuse for his behavior, but look at how the setup was. He was abused severely. And then he grows up. He doesn't really move away, and he doesn't really walk into a better situation. He just walks into his own. And then, as a way to make himself feel stronger, more powerful, he preys on women and takes their life. We don't know more than what he said in the transcript as to why he did what he did. But again, as I was saying before, one could guess that, take him at his word, he wanted to feel powerful, and what better way to feel powerful than to prey on someone who was much weaker than you, to have someone at your mercy. And so yeah, I think it's atrocious the way that some folks talk about Methany's crimes and Methany himself, and the myth why would you entertain that? Then again, why do we do anything we do? You know what I mean? Anyway, that's that.